A studio photograph from 1912 shows a bride. When the image is enlarged and people look closely at her veil, a disturbing truth comes to light. Detective Rebecca Walsh was browsing through old photographs at Murphy's Antiques in downtown Chicago. She was looking for a birthday gift for her mother, digging through boxes filled with sepia-toned wedding portraits. Then one picture made her stop instantly. It was a wedding photograph dated 1912, showing a couple posed formally. The groom stood upright and confident in a dark suit, his face clear and sharp. He was a well-kept man in his early 50s, with a thick mustache and a calm, assured look. Next to him stood the bride, dressed in a detailed white gown covered in fine beadwork, but her face could not be seen at all. A very heavy lace veil fell from an ornate headpiece, forming a solid curtain that completely hid her features. This was not normal for wedding photographs of that time, where brides usually showed their faces proudly. Here, the veil stayed fully lowered, hiding every detail of the woman underneath. The groom's hand rested on her shoulder in a way that felt proud and almost controlling. The bride's posture suggested strength and self-assurance, not shyness. Rebecca searched the marriage archives and quickly found a record. Thomas Whitmore, age 52, widower, married to Helen Stone, age 35, on June 22, 1912. Thomas Whitmore appeared in city business listings as the owner of Whitmore Manufacturing, a successful furniture company. Society columns from early 1912 mentioned his engagement to Miss Helen Stone, who had recently arrived from St. Louis. Then Rebecca found something unsettling. A death notice dated July 15, 1912, less than a month after the wedding. Thomas Whitmore, respected businessman, died suddenly at his home. The cause was listed as heart failure. He was survived by his wife, Mrs. Helen Whitmore. The funeral was private. Rebecca searched deeper. A short police report stated, "Subject found dead in bed." Wife reported he complained of chest pain during the night. Family doctor signed death certificate. Cause, heart failure. No autopsy performed. No suspicious circumstances noted. Thomas Whitmore had died just 3 weeks after getting married. His new wife, Helen, inherited everything he owned, the estate, the business, the house, the bank accounts, all of it. Rebecca felt her heart race. She looked into what happened to Helen Whitmore after her husband's death. Property records showed that she sold the house and the business within 2 months, turning everything into cash. After that, Helen Whitmore disappeared from Chicago records completely. There was no forwarding address and no further paperwork. A wealthy man had married a woman whose face was hidden in their wedding photo. 3 weeks later, he was dead. His widow took everything and vanished. Rebecca widened her investigation beyond Chicago. If Helen Stone had killed Thomas Whitmore and disappeared with his money, had she done this before? She searched records in St. Louis, the city Helen was said to have come from. There she found a similar story. In March 1911, a widower named Robert Mitchell, age 48, owner of a textile import business, married Margaret Stone. 2 months later, Robert Mitchell died suddenly of heart failure. His widow inherited everything, sold the assets quickly, and disappeared. Rebecca's hands shook as she dug further back. Indianapolis, September 1910. James Harrison, age 55, a banker, married Catherine Stone. 6 weeks later, James died. Heart failure. His widow inherited his wealth and vanished. Kansas City, May 1910. William Bradford, age 50, a merchant, married Elizabeth Stone. 1 month later, William died of heart failure. His widow inherited everything and disappeared. The pattern was clear. A woman using different versions of the surname Stone moved from city to city, targeting wealthy widowers. She married them quickly, and within weeks they died from what looked like natural causes. She collected their fortunes, sold off everything, and moved on to the next city. Rebecca counted at least 6 cases between 1910 and 1912 possible. Why more in places where records were poorly kept? This woman had killed at least 6 husbands, gathering fortunes as she moved steadily across the Midwest. But who was she really? Stone was clearly a fake name. Her first name changed with every marriage. Helen, Margaret, Catherine, Elizabeth. She left no real identity behind, only dead husbands and emptied bank accounts. Rebecca went back to the wedding photograph and studied the hidden face beneath the veil. The woman had hidden herself in every city, never allowing a clear photograph or solid record. This wedding picture was the only image Rebecca had found, and even here the killer's face was fully concealed. But maybe the veil itself held answers. Rebecca began scanning the photograph at very high resolution, hoping modern tools could reveal something the old camera had captured. As she zoomed in on the fine lace, something strange appeared. The veil was incredibly detailed, filled with floral and geometric designs that formed layers of thin transparency. Within those layers, faint reflections appeared. During the long exposure needed for photography in 1912, the reflective threads in the lace had captured images. Rebecca adjusted the brightness and contrast. Her breath stopped. Embedded in the veil were faces. Not the bride's face, which stayed hidden, but other faces. Men's faces, faint but clear enough to see. She counted 6 separate faces reflected in the veil. All were male, all middle-aged, all wearing serious expressions like formal portraits. Rebecca separated each face and enhanced them one by one. Then she compared them to the records she had collected. The first face matched Robert Mitchell from St. Louis, the textile importer who died in 1911. The second matched James Harrison from Indianapolis, the banker who died in 1910. The third matched William Bradford from Kansas City, the merchant who died in 1910. She identified 3 more faces belonging to men from cities she had not yet examined: Cincy, Naughty, Detroit, and Louisville. She searched death records from those cities and found them. George Sullivan, Cincinnati, 1909. Henry Morrison, Detroit, 1909. Charles Bennett, Louisville, 1908. All wealthy widowers, all had died within weeks of marrying women using the Stone surname. Every one of them had left everything to their new wives. The killer had been holding photographs of her earlier victims during her wedding to Thomas Whitmore. She had surrounded herself with images of the men she had murdered, and the reflective veil captured them during the long exposure. It was a collection of trophies, and she had unknowingly preserved proof of her crimes in her own wedding photograph. Rebecca needed to understand how the killer had managed to murder so many men without raising suspicion. She requested court orders to exhume the bodies, hoping modern science could find what doctors in 1912 had missed. Thomas Whitmore's grave at Graceland Cemetery was opened first. The embalming process had preserved enough tissue for testing. Dr. Sarah Kim, a forensic toxicologist, carried out detailed analysis. The results were clear. There were massive amounts of arsenic in the tissue. This man was poisoned slowly over several weeks, Dr. Kim explained. Small doses at first, then larger ones. The symptoms would look like heart disease, tiredness, chest pain, uneven heartbeat. In 1912, doctors would not test for poison unless they suspected something criminal. A rich, middle-aged man dying of heart failure would not seem suspicious. Rebecca secured exhumation orders for 3 more victims whose graves could be found. Each showed the same result: arsenic poisoning. The killer used the same method every time: slow poisoning that looked like natural illness, giving her time to make sure inheritance papers were completed before death. Arsenic was easy to get in 1912. It was sold legally for pest control and household use. A woman could buy it without drawing attention. Mixed into food or drink over weeks, it would kill quietly while appearing to be a normal sickness. In the photograph, the bride's hands were visible below the veil, folded calmly at her waist. The studio mark read Harrison Photography, Chicago, June 22, 1912. Strange, really. The shop owner had said, "It's a wedding photo where you never see the bride's face. I found it in an estate sale, no details about who they were." Rebecca's instincts had immediately reacted. Why would a bride hide her face completely in her own wedding picture? She bought the photograph on the spot, sensing it was more than just a strange image. It was proof of something dark. Rebecca brought the photograph back to her office in the Chicago Police Department's cold case unit. She set up her high-resolution scanner and began a careful step-by-step examination. The groom's face was sharp and easy to recognize. With the date June 22, 1912, she knew she could trace him through historical records. Chicago marriage licenses from that time were carefully kept. She began there. The killer had perfected her method over at least 7 murders. She had learned the exact dosing, enough to kill within weeks, but slow enough to avoid obvious signs of poisoning. She had mastered the act of playing the caring wife, attending to her husband while secretly giving him the poison that would end his life. Rebecca examined pharmacy records from the cities where the deaths occurred. In 3 of them, she found records showing a Mrs. Stone purchasing arsenic, listed for pest control purposes. The same woman, using her alias, had left a paper trail she believed would never link her to the deaths officially recorded as heart failure. Rebecca needed to find out who the killer really was before she disappeared again. She looked through missing person reports and wanted posters from before 1908, searching for women who might have assumed new identities. In Pittsburgh, she had a breakthrough. A wanted poster from 1907, wanted Clara Hoffman, age 30, suspected in her husband Friedrich Hoffman's death. The poster explained she had fled Pittsburgh after her husband's sudden death, with insurance investigators suspecting poisoning. The poster warned she should be considered dangerous. A photograph on the poster showed a woman with sharp features. Rebecca compared the facial structure, body type, and posture to what was visible in the wedding photograph. The height, build, and hand positioning matched. She researched Friedrich Hoffman's death in 1907. He had died suddenly after 3 weeks of illness. His widow Clara had tried to collect a substantial life insurance policy, but the insurance company became suspicious because of the sudden death and the young wife. They ordered an autopsy, which confirmed arsenic poisoning. By the time the results came back, Clara Hoffman had already fled Pittsburgh with whatever money she could take. She had learned from that mistake. In future murders, she avoided insurance, policies that required scrutiny, and instead married wealthy men, inheriting their estates directly. Clara Hoffman had transformed into stone, a new identity for a perfected method. Between 1908 and 1912, she refined her system, moving from city to city, killing husbands, taking their wealth, and disappearing before anyone grew suspicious. But who was Clara before Friedrich? Rebecca traced her further back. Clara Hoffman had been born Clara Henshaw in 1877 in rural Pennsylvania. She married young to a farmer named John Henshaw. In 1905, John died officially from influenza, but Rebecca suspected poisoning. Clara collected his life insurance and modest savings, moved to Pittsburgh, married the wealthier Friedrich Hoffman, and began her career as a serial husband killer. By 1912, when she married Thomas Whitmore in Chicago, she had killed at least 8 men over 7 years. Rebecca found records for Harrison Photography Studio and discovered that the photographer's grandson, Michael Harrison, still lived in Chicago. She contacted him and explained her investigation. Michael said, "My grandfather kept detailed journals about H's work. I have them in storage. Let me look for 1912. 2 days later, Michael called back. I found the entry about that wedding. My grandfather wrote several paragraphs. He was disturbed by it. Michael read aloud, June 22, 1912. Most unusual wedding session today. Mr. Thomas Whitmore, prominent businessman, arrived with his new bride for a formal portrait. The bride insisted on keeping her veil completely drawn. Mr. Whitmore seemed uneasy but deferred to her wishes. She claimed religious modesty, but her behavior suggested something else, deliberate concealment. She held items during the session that appeared to be photographs, positioning them where the veil would hide them. She was meticulous about lighting and exposure. Mr. Whitmore seemed deeply in love, calling her "my dear Helen." Speaking of honeymoon plans, she barely responded, focused entirely on keeping her face hidden. After they left, my grandfather felt profound unease. Something about the woman seemed wrong. He had autographed hundreds of weddings, but never seen a bride so determined to hide her face. Rebecca asked if the original glass plate negative still existed. Michael found it preserved carefully in his grandfather's archive. Rebecca arranged for it to be scanned at even higher resolution than the print. The enhanced scan revealed more details in the reflected photographs the bride had been holding. These weren't just portraits. They were newspaper clippings, obituaries of her dead husbands, carefully cut out and kept as trophies. Clara had been holding the obituaries of her victims during her wedding to her next target. Rebecca traced what happened after Thomas Whitmore's death. Clara, using the name Helen Whitmore, sold his business and house by September 1912. taking approximately $85,000, equivalent to over $2 million today. She liquidated everything and vanished from Chicago. Rebecca looked for similar cases in other cities. After mid-1912, she found a lead in Milwaukee. In November 1st, 912, a widower named George Patterson married Catherine Stone in December. George Patterson died heart failure. His widow inherited and disappeared. After that, the trail went cold. No similar cases appeared in Midwestern cities after late 1912. Perhaps Clara had moved to areas with poorer record-keeping, changed her method, or something had stopped her. Rebecca expanded her search to death records in Portland, Oregon. In April 1913, a woman named Helen Stone died at a charity hospital. Cause: arsenic poisoning. The hospital record noted, patient admitted in severe distress. Appeared to have ingested poison accidentally or deliberately. No family located. Patient died within hours. Buried in city cemetery, unmarked grave. The timing, location, and name matched. Rebecca theorized Clara had accidentally poisoned herself, either by mixing her own arsenic or mistaking medications, a fitting end for a woman who had killed 8 or 9 men with poison. She arranged for the grave to be exhumed. DNA analysis would take months, but if confirmed, it would provide closure. The serial husband killer had died alone, unknown, by her own weapon. Meanwhile, Rebecca had enough evidence to document the crimes and identify the victims. 8 confirmed murders, possibly 9, across 7 years in 8 cities. Fortunes stolen, families destroyed, all by a woman who hid her identity so well that no one connected the deaths until one wedding photograph, with a veil that accidentally captured her trophies, revealed the truth 112 years later. Rebecca held a press conference at Chicago Police Headquarters, displaying the wedding photograph with enhanced images of the reflected obituaries in the veil. Between 1908 and 1912, Rebecca began. A woman using the alias Stone married at least 8 wealthy widowers across the Midwest. Within weeks of each marriage, her husband died of apparent heart failure. Modern forensic analysis proves these men were poisoned with arsenic. The killer inherited their estates, totaling approximately $400,000 in 1912 currency, roughly $10 million today, and disappeared after each murder. She explained how the wedding photograph preserved evidence. Clara Hoffman, the killer's true identity, had held obituaries of her previous victims during her wedding to Thomas Whitmore. The veil's lace reflected these trophies during the long photographic exposure. She thought hiding her face would protect her identity, but instead, her veil captured evidence of her crimes. Rebecca displayed the victims: John Henshaw, 1905, Friedrich Hoffman, 1907, Charles Bennett, 1908, Henry Morrison, 1909, George Sullivan, 1909, William Bradford, 1910, James Harrison, 1910, Robert Mitchell, 1911, Thomas Whitmore, 1912, possibly George Patterson, 1912. These men were wealthy, widowed, and lonely. Clara exploited their desire for companionship, married them quickly, poisoned them slowly, and moved on with their money. She believed she had committed perfect crimes, but the photograph told a different story. The media reacted immediately. Headlines read, "Black Widow Killer, Century-Old Crime Solved, Wedding Veil Reveals Serial Killer Victims, Woman Poisoned 8 Husbands, Hid Identity for Decades." The case fascinated the public. Descendants of the victims were found, many recalling family stories of sudden death after remarriages. Now, they had answers. 3 months later, a memorial service was held at Graceland Cemetery in Chicago. Descendants of 5 confirmed victims attended, meeting for the first time, united by their ancestors' shared fate. A memorial stone listed all confirmed victims. In memory of those lost to Clara Hoffman's crimes, 1905 to 1912, they were remembered. Rebecca stood before the gathering. These men were vulnerable, widowed, and lonely, she said. Clara Hoffman exploited that vulnerability systematically. For over a century, their deaths were recorded as natural. Today we acknowledge the truth. They were murdered by someone they trusted, someone they married, someone who promised to love them. Thomas Whitmore's great-grandson spoke. My family always wondered about Thomas's sudden death after remarriage. My great-grandmother suspected something but couldn't prove it. She died never knowing the truth. Today, 112 years later, we finally have answers. My great-nd father was murdered. His killer stole not just his money but his life, his future, and his time with family. Thank you, Detective Walsh, for giving him justice. Other descendants echoed similar gratitude. The memorial offered closure, acknowledgement, and dignity to victims whose deaths had been dismissed as natural for over a century. After the service, Rebecca returned to her office and carefully packed the wedding photograph for the Chicago History Museum. It would be displayed in an exhibition titled Hidden Behind the Veil, Clara Hoffman and the Husband She Murdered. Rebecca looked at the photograph one last time. Thomas Whitmore stood proud beside his bride, unaware he had only 3 weeks to live. Clara stood beside him, face completely hidden, holding obituaries of her previous victims. You thought hiding your face would protect you, Rebecca said quietly. You thought you had escaped. But your veil betrayed you. The evidence you carried, your trophies, the obituaries of your victims, was captured in the lace. You tried to remain invisible, but you left proof. Now, everyone knows what you did. Your victims are remembered. You are exposed. Justice, even 112 years late, has been served. The photograph ensured Clara Hoffman's crimes would never be forgotten, and more importantly, that her victims, 8 men who sought love and found death, would finally be remembered not as men who died of weak hearts, but as men who were murdered, whose lives mattered, whose deaths deserved acknowledgement and truth.